So it's my pleasure, and I take great pride in inviting Dr. Rajiv Chawla. He has been a prolific speaker, very good writer of a handbook on diabetology that I have gone through, and he is almost one of the 7 books he has authored. He has been a recipient of several awards, including 10 Oration Awards. He has been past chairman RSSDI Delhi chapter, past secretary RSSDI national body, organizing secretary annual conferences of RSSDI way back in 2006 and again in 2013, scientific chair for RSSDI 2018, scientific chair for 10th World Congress of Diabetes, Diabetes India 2017. He is the executive editor, International Journal of Diabetes in Developing Countries. I have read several of his valuable articles in those, and he has been president DIPSI for past year 2019 and is immediate past president of RSSDI before our dear Dr. Bansi took over. So we welcome you, sir, for enlightening us on the subject of newer SGLT2 available in India. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Dr. Vinod. Thanks for all those kind words. Thank you, Dr. Bansi, for this opportunity to be part of a very, very important national and international conference. Year after year, I think it is getting more and more popular. I lost the... What happened? Can you see my slides?
Yes, yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Bansi and Team Diacare for this opportunity. It's nice to be on panel with Dr. Jyoti and Sanjay, both being very, very close friends. And I honestly missed the session of Jyoti, so I'll have to have inputs from Dr. Jyoti personally some other time. Well, once Bansi gave me this topic, I was not very sure whether he wants me to talk about SGLT2 inhibitor in management of type 2 diabetes as a class, or whether he was talking about a particular novel SGLT2 therapy. But moment he cleared that it has nothing to do with any molecule, so I thought there have been 100 presentations on SGLT2, on the mechanisms of SGLT2, its role in diabetes. So let me give you something what is new in SGLT2. So I'll not be touching upon the basic mechanisms of SGLT2, but we'll try to give you the evidence which is very, very new in management of type 2 diabetes as related to SGLT2 therapy. We all know that atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease accounts for 85% of total CVD burden in diabetes. We know that both diabetes as well as atherosclerosis, they follow a common soil hypothesis. So it's not surprising if I say that nearly 1 in 6 patients with type 2 diabetes will have atherosclerotic manifestation. Nearly 2 in 3 will have, during their congestive heart failure, contributed by atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and nearly 1 in 3 patients with CKD, they do have atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And it is very commonly said that 2/3 of all deaths in type 2 diabetes happen because of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. In fact, in our dialysis room, we normally see those patients who have end-stage renal disease. They never die out of any complication of dialysis. Actually, they die of coronary artery disease or CAD. So that is what is the magnitude of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease in setting of type 2 diabetes is concerned. You know, we belong to a typical thin fat Indian phenotype. So we need to have our own priorities while managing a patient of type 2 diabetes. Not only we tend to develop insulin resistance very, very early in the course while development of type 2 diabetes. In fact, our insulin resistance is much higher as compared to Caucasian patient. Not only we have, I told you, a common soil contributing towards premature cardiovascular disease. It happens almost a decade earlier as compared to the Caucasian patient. Similarly, we are also at a very great risk of developing rapid decline in EGFR as compared to the Caucasian patient. Unfortunately, this all goes on as a cardiorenal continuum, which we need to break upon or stop by having more patient into the time in range. Of course, targeting a very intensive control, but not on the cost of hypoglycemia, because hypoglycemia itself might trigger either a coronary or maybe a cerebral accident also many times. And moment we address the issue of adiposity, especially the visceral adiposity and weight reduction with the drug, for every 1 kg weight loss, you are going to have some amount of HbA1c reduction. So that is what is the beauty of the drugs which are now available in our armamentarium. This is what I said, it has to be viewed upon as a cardiorenal continuum or a cardiorenal metabolic risk, which is there in all patients of type 2 diabetes, more so because type 2, it is much more heterogeneous. If you're talking about type 1 diabetes, it has a very, very linear course, especially with microvascular complication. But in our own publication, we have been talking about that, our own hypothesis that micro and macrovascular complication should be viewed as a continuum, not as a distinct phenomena, because with persistent hyperglycemia, not only you have with common soil hypothesis and early acute as well as chronic endothelial dysfunction contributing towards the onset of atherosclerosis, which then leads on to rampant coronary artery disease or a triple vessel disease in most of the patients. So these patients are at a very great risk for having acute coronary syndrome or maybe a stroke also. There is a left ventricular remodeling, which then leads on to heart failure, and subsequently these patients have a cardiovascular death. Similarly, you have a microangiopathy simultaneously going on from microalbuminuria, a progression to macroalbuminuria, a CKD, end-stage renal disease. And I told you that even at end-stage renal disease, most of the patient, at least 3/4 of them will have a cardiovascular death. So I think this cardiorenal metabolic risk or a continuum should be viewed upon as a practical opportunity, because we can intervene at every stage of this continuum to break this continuum and to reduce micro as well as macrovascular complication in the setting of type 2 diabetes. Unfortunately, all intensive glycemic control, which all the trials, whether it was UKPDS, ACCORD, ADVANCE, and BEDIT, they have resulted only in reduction of microangiopathy to great extent, maybe as high as 35 to 50%. But if you talk about cardiovascular disease or this continuum of macrovascular complication, that has not been checked with intensive glycemic control. In fact, there was a higher mortality seen in a ACCORD patient. Even in ADVANCE also, it was almost like 1, where it also ended up with little higher cardiovascular mortality, except in the UKPDS arm, where most of the patients were that time on metformin, and there was not a rapid HbA1c reduction. They didn't have a higher cardiovascular disease, but well, that time 14 or 16% reduction in MI, that was not p-value wise significant. It was the subsequent follow-up over the next 20 years which has shown that those patients who had intensive glycemic control right in the beginning in the UKPDS had much better prognosis in terms of reduction in MI by 14%, which is now seen as a p-value wise significant. So unfortunately, intensive glycemic control is not associated with improvement of heart failure also, which is the main contributor towards cardiovascular death these days, what we have sort of learned over last 10 years. So all the meta-analysis of 4 studies in patient with type 2 diabetes talking about hospitalization for heart failure or fatal heart failure, whether it was in ACCORD, ADVANCE, UKPDS or VEDE trial, they have shown that there is no reduction. At least there was no increase with intensive glucose control with any drug, but p-value wise there was no difference, and actually the hazard ratio is absolutely 1. So there is no reduction either in macrovascular risk or in hospitalization for heart failure or death related to heart failure. Unfortunately, although we have a very large armamentarium of drugs which is now available for management of type 2 diabetes, but all these drugs, as I told you, they have not been able to check the progression of cardiometabolic risk, whether you have drugs like insulin or pioglitazone or DPP4, which are at best CV neutral, except the metformin, where there could be little reduction. I told you it is what has been seen in UKPDS also. But except the drugs like SGLT2 inhibitor or GLP-1 analog, where not only you get good glycemic control without getting any episodes of hypoglycemia, actually both the drugs lead on to weight loss also, some amount of reduction in blood pressure, and could be lipid friendly also. That is how possibly using a drug like SGLT2 could check the progression of cardiometabolic risk or the continuum in these patients. So that is what is the beauty of using a drug like SGLT2 inhibitor, because of the potential benefits. We are not talking today of only the glycemic benefits coming from SGLT2 therapy. We all know with good glycemic control, definitely you'll have reduction in microangiopathy, but this mechanism being an insulin independent mechanism, so it could be, SGLT2 inhibitor could be used all across the spectrum of the disease in combination with any of the drug, may it be monotherapy with metformin, with maybe DPP4 or SUs, or even with insulin, because it has all other extra glycemic benefits coming either in the form of osmotic diuresis, or it could be because of glycosuria, leading on to less absorption of glucose, and then subsequently leading on to calorie loss on daily basis, almost 300 calories a day, which not only leads on to weight loss, some amount of blood pressure reduction also happens with this class of drugs. So SGLT2 inhibitors, they are not just working as glycemic agent or anti-hyperglycemic agent, because these are having multiple mechanisms to address to. They are also reducing beta cell toxicity by reduction in overall beta cell, you can say lipotoxicity or beta cell hypertoxicity. So there is going to be an improved beta cell function. There is going to be an increased lipid oxidation, and these also improve GLUT4 expression. So there is a better utilization of glucose both into as adipose tissue as well as into the muscles. But only thing is that right in the beginning, there could be a little increase in glucagon level, because moment there is a rapid calorie loss, body reads it physiologically something like a situation where body is starving. So there could be an increase, defensive or physiological increase in glucagon, leading on to, in the early days when you start with SGLT2, of course, then it plateaus with little increase in expression of alpha cell, leading on to glucagon and increase in glucose levels. So the metabolic implications of SGLT2 inhibitors in type 2 diabetes are great. Not only we tend to have better time in range once patient is on SGLT2 as early as within 24 hours. There is a reduction in visceral adiposity at least. There is also going to be a reduction in inflammation, and all the biomarkers of inflammation will go down. There is an improvement in insulin sensitivity. It also tends to restore autonomic balance and gets you all the hemodynamic benefits. All the more it is important when you're using drugs like SGLT2 inhibitor, or for that matter even DPP4 in Asian patient, the glycemic reduction even tends to be much greater as compared to the Caucasian patient. And in this publication, it has been seen, it is a analysis of almost 7 to 9 studies versus Asian and white or Caucasian population, where it was seen that HbA1c reduction was much better in the Asian group as compared to the Caucasian group, both with SGLT2 as well as DPP4 class of drugs. So whenever you are using a drug like SGLT2 inhibitor, I told you much more patient will be in time in range, and good thing is it happens as early as day 1. So if you perform an CGMS on these patients, once you start these patients on SGLT2 inhibitor, immediately within 24 hours, you'll find that as compared to the placebo, there is a much better time in range profile what has been seen in these patients. So these patients, they also reduce inflammation. And again, at 1 year, if you try to look for HOMA model of insulin resistance, there is actually a reduction by 42%, and all the markers of inflammation, whether it is HSCRP or other markers of inflammation at 1 year, are almost down by 54%. Not only that, we know once we are using these drugs in the management of type 2 diabetes, there has been actually a reduction in hepatic fat content by almost 4%, what has been seen in all those patients who have either NAFLD or NASH. Not only that, there actually could be a improvement in histological findings of these patients with NASH in setting of type 2 diabetes as early as 6 months. So in fact, there has been a very good trial on canagliflozin talking about reduction in NASH score overall within 6 months of treatment, and same has been seen with empagliflozin also, if these patients have simultaneously NASH happening. And there is actually to some extent histopathological reversing also, which happens as early as 6 months. Not only that, the risk of new onset obstructive sleep apnea also goes down by 52%. And mind it, this is versus placebo in patient with type 2 diabetes. And this is independent of the benefits coming as a result of weight reduction, systolic BP, hematocrit, or HbA1c. You could always debate that once there is a reduction in body weight and systolic blood pressure and overall glycemic control is better, so obviously OSA will go down. But this is independent of all these benefits, that there could be a reduction in overall OSA, new onset, in almost 52% of patients. So once you use SGLT2 drugs, again, there could be a better control of hypertension, more so in the nocturnal hours. This is what is a SACRA study talking about, that not only there is a reduction in systolic pressure in the nighttime, daytime, but overall 24-hour blood pressure control is much better in these patients once these are on SGLT2 inhibitor. And it has been again seen that these could check the progression of albuminuria, whether patient has microalbuminuria, so they might come back to normal albuminuria, and there could be a reduction by USCR by 32%. And if patient already has macroalbuminuria, there could be a reduction in albumin creatinine at 24 hours by almost 42%. So let's say that SGLT2 have a broad bandwidth approach for reduction of heart failure and overall renal events, because whether EGFR is as high as 85, which is near normal in garden variety patient, what has been seen in DECLARE TB trial, or it is reduced to less than 40, what has been seen in CREDENCE, or even less than 30, even then there are going to be benefits all across the spectrum of reduction of EGFR. So this is what is the beauty of this drug, that SGLT2 inhibitor, they modify several risk factors through various mechanisms. And simple ones we have been talking about is diuresis, we have been talking about natriuresis. Because of glycosuria, we know there is going to be reduction in calories because of waste of glucose going into the urine, but primarily through natriuresis, and improvement in cardiac function by reduction in preload or afterload, or increased cardiometabolic efficiency because of different energetic mechanism I'll be alluding to. And there is actually a reduction in left ventricle mass also, and it also has beneficial effects on renal function, which I'll be again taking into the details. So here is a strong evidence from all CV outcomes on SGLT2 inhibitor as early as EMPA-REG, which got published in 2015, subsequently CANVAS R, then DECLARE TB, CREDENCE or VERTIS, which is recently published this year itself. All these patients, of course, they had different type of population. These populations are too heterogeneous to actually compare the benefits. But if you see that in EMPA-REG, there were 100% patients who had established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. CANVAS had 2/3 patient with established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, while DECLARE TB had only 40% patient, and VERTIS also had 100% patient with established cardiovascular disease. Not only that, in terms of heart failure also, baseline heart failure was there at least in 10 to 20% of patient in these outcome trials, and actually 25% of patients had reduced EGFR less than 60 ml in all these trials, but still there was a greater reduction in 3-point MACE. So if you go through all these trials, you will see that EMPA-REG had almost 14% 3-point MACE reduction, which was p-value wise very, very superior. In CANVAS trial also there was a reduction by almost 18%, but individual components were not all that p-value wise significant, but overall 3-point MACE reduction was seen even in the CANVAS trial in 14% of patients, although DECLARE had only 10% reduction in 3-point MACE. But if you try to compare the benefits in atherosclerotic cardiovascular group versus non-cardiovascular disease, most of the benefits have in terms of 3-point MACE reduction have been seen only in the group which had established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, not in the arm which had multiple risk factors. But one thing which is very, very robust in all those trials with SGLT2 inhibitor is that there is going to be a significant reduction in hospitalization with heart failure or composite heart failure with CV death, because there is going to be at least 35% reduction in overall risk of heart failure, irrespective whether these patients had atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or only multiple risk factors. Composite CV death or hospitalization for heart failure all across age groups have benefited with SGLT2 inhibitors as compared to the placebo therapy, but renal composite endpoints have significantly gone down. In fact, this is what is the best about. One is uniformly seen with all SGLT2 inhibitors all across ages is one is hospitalization for heart failure, composite heart failure with CVD death, as well as renal composite endpoint, which are down by almost 38 to 40%. And these renal composite endpoints are again independent whether patient had an established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or multiple risk factor. Benefits were almost alike, both the groups. Similarly, renal composite endpoints were also very, very robust, irrespective whether there was a EGFR less than 60, whether it was between 60 to 90 or more than 90. And you could see that all across benefit in terms of overall renal composite endpoint was seen at least in 35 to 40% of patient. A sneak peek to the future, something which you can predict before it becomes apparent, is that with SGLT2 inhibitor today, we are not talking of only the glycemic benefits. We are possibly talking of organ protection, especially heart and kidney, with all the multifactorial benefits, or you can say extrapancreatic benefits or pleiotropic benefits coming as a result of SGLT2 therapy. And that is what has been seen in DEPA heart failure, where it has been seen that heart failure risk has gone down by 30%, and overall composite CV death as well as heart failure has gone down by 26%, and CV death, which was not clearly apparent in declared TIMI, has again gone down by 18% in this DEPA heart failure. Even the secondary outcomes were very, very significant. These were down by 25%. But what was much more important was that these benefits were consistent, irrespective whether patient was having type 2 diabetes or whether patient was non-diabetic. Similarly, in DEPA CKD, again, it has been seen that renal composite endpoints are down by 35 to 40%. And this overwhelming response seen in reduction of overall renal composite endpoint led to early stoppage of DEPA CKD trial, less the people or the patients, those who were in placebo arm, missed this benefit. So it's not surprising if you have sort of look on the overall timelines of trial data as early as 2015 and 17, 18 and 19 and 20, that with that there has been an evolution of guidelines all across based on all the benefits which have been seen through very severe outcomes. Whether you talk about 2020 ACE guideline, where it has been said that after lifestyle modification, I think it is better that we start with a drug which, especially in the group which has atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which could be either a GLP-1 analog or a SGLT2 inhibitor. So ACE said that it has to be independent of glycemic control. If patient has established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or risk for heart failure or CKD, these patients must be on SGLT2 therapy. It could be even started earlier than metformin therapy also. And this is what European Society of Cardiology guidelines 2019. Minded, these are cardiology guidelines talking about a drug which is anti-hyperglycemic. So these guidelines said that all those patients who have atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, they may not be even on metformin. They can straightway be on SGLT2 therapy or GLP-1 analog. But if they are already on metformin, all these patients for benefit must be then on SGLT2 simultaneously to get all the benefits coming from SGLT2 inhibitors. And that is what ADA 2021 guidelines have also said, that as an indicator of high risk or established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or CKD or heart failure, every patient, again, based on the overall profile of the patient, irrespective of the baseline HbA1c, they have to be on SGLT2 inhibitor or GLP-1 analog, because evidence is very, very strong. It is almost 1A with these drugs. Similarly, Canadian guidelines 2019 talking about heart failure said that all those patients who are not diabetic, because they are now we are wiser from DEPA heart failure, where it has been seen that if your ejection fraction is less than 40%, irrespective whether you are diabetic or non-diabetic, you are going to get at least 25% risk reduction in heart failure and composite CV death. So all those patients who have reduced ejection fraction, irrespective whether you're diabetic or non-diabetic, it has to be SGLT2 inhibitor, has to be as the fifth add-on with standard care. And same has been said by European Renal Association or Dialysis Transplant Association, which has recommended that it is important to switch them to SGLT2 therapy plus metformin. Those patients who are having good HbA1c, even less than 7, a space should be made by reduction of other doses, and they should be put on simultaneously on SGLT2 inhibitor for getting the benefits in terms of renal composite endpoints. Well, there have been various mechanisms which have been proposed, but I think this slide which I came across is very, very important. Not everything can be explained, nor does it need to be explained, because we should be looking for the benefits coming from SGLT2 inhibitor, because still, in spite of the fact that almost 15 mechanisms have been identified to explain the benefits which have been coming in terms of CV risk reduction, heart failure hospitalization reduction, CV death reduction, or renal composite endpoint reduction, still I think it is a long way till we are sure that what exactly is working, whether it is only natriuresis or osmotic diuresis, or what Dr. Jyoti was talking about, sodium hydrogen exchanger 1 or 3, or the other mechanism which are operating. So somehow all the benefits which have been coming have been probably out of place as early as within 28 days or within 50 days of starting SGLT2 inhibitor. So when we talk about heart failure outcomes or the benefits with SGLT2 inhibitor, we know primarily it is through reduction of preload as well as afterload, which reduces plasma volume and vascular resistance goes down. We also know that there could be an improvement in myocardial energetics by being on ketone body usage as compared to on glucose, and there could be also reduction in inflammation and fibrosis leading on to cardiac remodeling. So sort of heart failure also goes down, and overall we know there is going to be a BP reduction also. And because with the reduction in LV mass and improvement in diastolic function, there will be an improved cardiac contractility which has been seen. So there is going to be a myocardial protection once patient is on SGLT2 inhibitor. Similarly, while trying to explain the renal composite reduction, we know there is a significant reduction in glomerular pressure by improvement in TGF, or maybe reduction in NHE3 or glomerular hyperfiltration, because there is an increased tone of afferent arterioles. So immediately, especially if you have combined with ACE or ARB, where there's going to be a dilation of afferent arterioles. So what happens is that in the proximal convoluted tubule, you have reduction in glomerular hyperfiltration. So there is a reduction in proteinuria, there is a reduction in inflammation, fibrosis, and overall there is going to be an improved tubular oxygenation, what has been seen while being on SGLT2 inhibitor. So there is going to be a stabilization of eGFR as early as within 3 months once patient is on SGLT2 inhibitor. So with subsequent reduction in intraglomerular pressure, reduction in systemic blood pressure, there's going to be a reduced tubular as well as glomerular injury, which will then lead on to reduction in overall renal composite endpoint. But I think important points, the pearls of wisdom for our juniors are that prohibit use of SGLT2 therapy in all those patients where EGFR, because still the label says EGFR less than 45 you should not use, although in CREDENS or in DEPA-CKD we have seen that benefits are coming as low as till EGFR 25 or 30. It should not be used in pregnant and breastfeeding women because risk is still not known. All acute stressful condition, maybe hospitalization, stress, surgery, or a situation of UDK, there we should not use SGLT2 inhibitor. All insulinic condition, those patients ideally should be on first insulin replacement, and then to reduce the doses of insulin, you may add SGLT2 inhibitors in those. And again, we have to be cautious in all elderly patients, those who are frail, where there's a possibility of volume depletion, maybe posterior hypertension, because there you might have AKI coming as a result of SGLT2 inhibitor. All those who are having complicated or upper UTIs or repeated GTIs, again, we should not use SGLT2 there. And of course, improper genital hygiene, if it is there we should not use SGLT2 inhibitor. So to summarize, cardiovascular renal metabolic risk or continuum, it is seen in setting of type 2 diabetes, and this is what is going to increase overall CV death or CVD in setting of type 2 diabetes. SGLT2 inhibitor could halt this process of ongoing cardio-renal continuum. So a personalized approach in every type 2 diabetic patient to reduce this risk of atherosclerosis, heart failure, CKD, or reduction in weight could be achieved by using SGLT2 inhibitor. And we are convinced today that real-world evidence has again shown or replicated the results what have been seen in CV outcome with SGLT2 inhibitors. So benefits have been actually replicated much better in the real world practice. So we should optimize clinical consideration of risk benefit for each anti-diabetic therapy in principle of individualized approach for every patient. So it has to be a individualized profile based approach. But you could say that today most of the patients, those who have BMI more than 23, they are already on metformin and they have multiple risk factors or presence of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or predisposition to heart failure or diabetic nephropathy. They must be on SGLT2 therapy. Thank you very much for your patience listening. You have